Hello, everyone, and good evening. I'm Don Arleth, and coming to you live from Warsaw, you're watching World News Tonight here on TVP World. Russia launches its largest drone strike with 188 drones targeting Ukraine. And after attending the G7, Ukraine's foreign minister traveled to Warsaw to meet with his Polish counterpart to discuss priorities for Kyiv. We'll have more on that in just a bit, but first up, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Poland's cash for visas investigation finds evidence against senior members of the former government. We will do everything to bring Armenia closer to the EU, said President of Poland, Andrzej Duda, during his official visit to Yerevan. And the Polish documentary Pianoforte has won the prestigious Emmy Award. Ukraine's membership of NATO is the only way to force Russia to lay down its weapons. These were the words of Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andrii Sybiha during talks with his Polish counterpart Radosław Sikorski in Warsaw. Katarzyna Nowicka has this next report.
Nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. That was one of the main points of the talks between Andrii Sybiha, the Ukrainian foreign minister, and Poland's foreign minister, Radosław Sikorski. The two emphasized that, especially after 1,000 days of the war had already taken place, and the incoming presidency of Donald Trump, which is also making the security situation quite shaky and future aid to Ukraine uncertain. The two stressed that all of these discussions that are taking place must also be attended by Ukraine. This is Sikorski's stance, of course. And they also commented on a recent report published by Le Monde, stressing that France and the United Kingdom were once again reigniting talks on possibly sending a military coalition to Ukraine.
The French president's ideas that France might take part in some kind of action on Ukrainian territory have been presented to the public. I have no source knowledge of the French-British talks, and I don't want to rely on press speculation, but I appreciate the idea that it should be Vladimir Putin who worries about what we are doing.
There can be no limit to the support for Ukraine, which is fighting a brutal aggressor. The priority must be the delivery of weapons right now, by the end of the year. We have a good dialogue with the United States.
The two also discussed the possibility of quick EU accession by Ukraine come 2025 when Poland takes the rotating presidency of the European Council. The two stressed that this would definitely be very important and a huge step for Ukraine. But the foreign minister, Sybiha, also stressed that it's NATO membership that would be that final nail in the coffin that would push Russia and Putin to the negotiating table to finally sign a truce. For TVP World, Katarzyna Nowicka.
Russia launched a record number of drone strikes on Ukraine in the early hours of Tuesday morning. It's the largest drone attack since the start of the full-scale invasion. And now joining us live from Kyiv with the details is our Ukraine correspondent, Oz Karaji. Good evening, Oz. Now, what more can you tell us about this overnight attack?
Well, on Tuesday, the Ukrainian Air Force reported a record 188 Russian drones crossing into Ukrainian territory. Now, according to the Ukrainian Air Force, they did intercept 76 of those drones, and 95 of them were taken down using electronic warfare measures. Ukraine's getting much more proficient in using EW measures to take down Russian drones. Now, Zelensky, there were no casualties reported in these attacks. However, there was energy infrastructure hit in the Ternopil in the western part of Ukraine, which caused damage to energy infrastructure. So they've had some power cuts out there. About 70% of Ternopil was left without power earlier on Tuesday. Now, Zelensky did speak out about this in one of his addresses on Tuesday, saying that 85 components in these drones are foreign sourced, and that Russia would not be able to launch these Shahed-style Iranian-inspired drones if they had no access to these foreign components. Elsewhere in Ukraine, we've had deaths in Sumy, 2 people killed, in a Russian MLRS attack on a Ukrainian residential building in the Sumy region of northern Ukraine. So again, a really difficult day for Ukrainian air defense, and they'll be hoping to get some good news coming with air defense from their partners in the coming weeks.
All right, Oz Kadaji reporting there from Kyiv. Thank you for your report. As Ukraine battles with intensifying Russian aerial attacks on its power grid, Kyiv's allies are meeting in various formats to ramp up support for the war-torn country. The Kremlin, meanwhile, has vowed to retaliate in response to Ukrainian attacks onto its territory, carried out with Western-supplied weapons. Yerevan reports.
The night of 25th of November was particularly busy for Ukrainian air defense. Russian forces launched more than 180 drones, an all-time record. Although Ukraine shot down more than 70, it is unknown how many were downed using other means.
95 UAVs were location lost, likely due to active electronic warfare by the defense forces, and 5 drones flew toward Belarus. Unfortunately, there were strikes on critical infrastructure facilities.
The attack damaged the power grid in Ternopil, a major city in western Ukraine, and cut around 70% of the power in the region. With the Russian attacks increasing and Ukraine's air defense capabilities shrinking, the NATO Secretary General urged allies to deliver on the commitments made at the NATO summit in Washington, including more air defense systems.
Our support for Ukraine has kept them in the fight, but we need to go further to change the trajectory of the conflict.
Ukraine, however, is not focused only on defense. The Kremlin has said it is preparing retaliatory measures after Ukraine fired US-made ATACMS missiles into Russia twice in the last 3 days. Moscow said both strikes targeted air defense positions in the Kursk region and claimed on both locations some missiles reached their targets.
His nuclear blackmail started from the very beginning of this full-scale Warsaw. There's nothing new here.
According to French outlet Le Monde, the UK and France are reportedly considering the deployment of troops to Ukraine. The idea is supposedly that they could be located along the Belarusian border as a buffer, allowing Ukraine to send more troops to the east of the country.
What's important is that the idea can be entertained, that scenarios can be worked out, and that Russia understands that Europe is capable of making that move.
While the UK and France have been training Ukrainian soldiers, troop deployments have been a taboo topic. So far, neither Paris nor London have officially approved any move.
The committee investigating Poland's cash for visas scandal has published a new report claiming that 11 former government officials and foreign ministry employees violated the law. They could even face criminal charges for their alleged involvement in illegally supplying visas to foreigners. Committee Chairman Pavel Sova says that the former Law and Justice government allowed over 3.5 million foreigners to enter Poland. Franciszek Pilis has more.
A special parliamentary committee in Poland has been investigating a scandal since February of this year, one that shook the country and the EU to its core. The cash for visa scandal, or Visagate, saw the alleged involvement of several officials from the previous administration in the sale of Polish visas to foreigners for profit. And now, after nearly 10 months of constant investigation, the committee's chairman, Civic Platform MP Marek Sowa, has presented a draft of the committee's final report.
The committee's most important finding is that the Law and Justice government contributed to the uncontrolled influx of migrants. The foreign ministry harbored a corrupt system which made it possible to issue visas while bypassing the required procedures. Law and Justice politicians were aware of this process, its scale, and where the migrants came from. Despite this, they did nothing to stop it.
According to the report, the Law and Justice government let 3,610,000 people into Poland during its tenure, with individual officials profiting of issued visas. Most of the migrants came from Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus. The final tally doesn't include Ukrainian refugees who fled their country following Russia's invasion. The report also says 11 former government officials could face persecution for their involvement in the scandal, including former Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, former Foreign Minister Zbigniew Rau, and former Interior Minister Mariusz Kamiński. A Law and Justice MP who's also on the committee criticized its chairman for the hasty handling of the report, saying opposition representatives weren't given enough time to familiarize themselves with it.
This isn't a committee report, this is your personal report. This is a document someone left on your desk just a moment ago, giving us no opportunity to study its contents. We haven't even had a chance to read through it. I think the style in which you're conducting this investigation is embarrassing.
The attorney of one of the suspects in the case, Piotr Wawrzyk, the former deputy foreign minister who's accused of creating a migration ring that helps transport people from Africa and Asia to the United States, said the process of handing out visas by different Polish governments needs to be studied to fully understand if any wrongdoing was committed.
Publicizing and explaining how these actions occurred and occur in the previous and current government should certainly be a matter of public debate. Political dynamics often require these sorts of approaches, and now people are trying to retroactively add, in my opinion, disproportional and non-factual arguments onto a wider concept that still needs to be explained.
Amendments to the report will be accepted until the 3rd of December and then voted on during the day, after which the report will be sent to Parliament for further discussions on December 6th.
We will do everything to bring Armenia as close as possible to the European Union, Polish President Andrzej Duda announced during his ongoing official visit to Armenia. The purpose of the trip is to discuss Russia's increasingly aggressive imperial policy. Armenia has been making an effort to strengthen ties with the European Union while simultaneously loosening Russia's grip. Piotr Miszczuk has this next report.
Less than 3 million people live in this Caucasus nation, surrounded by authoritarian countries Iran and Azerbaijan, and increasingly authoritarian Turkey and Georgia. In the throes of a geopolitical quandary, Armenian President Vahan Khachaturian has said he's looking to further his country's cooperation with EU member states, including Poland.
We appreciate Poland's support for Armenia's integration into the European framework through various initiatives.
With the Polish presidency of the Council of the EU set to begin on January the 1st, Poland can contribute to Armenia's EU integration process considerably. Poland will be setting the tone for the bloc as a whole, said Polish President Andrzej Duda.
Absolutely, we will do everything to bring Armenia as close as possible to the European Union in any area where only the Armenian authorities and the Armenian society show the will to do so. We will try to support and seek the best possible solutions here.
In 2021, Azerbaijani troops crossed into Armenian territory, which, in line with bilateral agreements, should have prompted a response from Russia, but didn't. Following the incursion, many Armenians questioned Russia's role as a peace guarantor, according to political analyst Rafi Elliott.
The European Union was always seen as this obvious alternative. However, as long as Armenia was too close to Russia, EU membership seemed like a distant fantasy.
Earlier this year, Armenia asked Russian soldiers to leave their post at the Armenian capital's international airport and on the border with Iran, but their presence at the country's other borders remains.
There's a Russian base in the second largest city of Armenia called Gyumri. This base has been there actually since Tsarist times and is continuously manned by Russian soldiers. There's between 2,000 and 5,000 Russian military personnel of various affiliations stationed in the country at the moment.
And the economic ties with Russia remain strong, according to experts.
Armenia imports natural gas from Russia and some other very important staples is being imported from Russia, including wheat, including oil products like petrol, like liquid gas, LPG, etc.
During his visit to Armenia, the Polish president, who met with the Azerbaijani president 2 weeks ago, also offered to help defuse the ongoing conflict with Azerbaijan.
If we were needed here in support in stabilizing the situation, we are ready at any time to seek peaceful solutions here on our part.
Those concerns notwithstanding, Armenia's accession path to the EU might gain momentum soon enough, especially given that in May the European Parliament passed a resolution allowing the country to officially apply for EU membership.
Deliveries of Russian liquefied natural gas to some Western European ports have increased substantially this year, a portion of which are later resold to third countries. The EU is seeking to ban this practice next year with the objective of completely weaning off Russian fossil fuels by 2027. Our business reporter Jan Kennedy has more.
Ships like these are now responsible for most deliveries of Russian natural gas to Western Europe, becoming a popular alternative for pipeline imports. This has been the case especially in France, which this year received its largest volume of LNG imports from Russia since 2018. According to experts, there are three possible reasons. Wojciech Jakubik from the Energy Security Center offers the first.
Explanation might be that they are getting ready for some kind of natural gas imports from Russia embargo that might be on the way. Not only the transshipment ban, but also the full embargo on LNG from Russia.
The second, according to Jakubik, could be a sign of increased interest of Western companies in importing Russian gas to decrease the cost of fuel imports. However, there's also a third factor at play: the ongoing long-term contracts held by energy companies, including Total Energy's SEFE and Naturgy Energy Group.
Until you have a force majeure, so the situation in which you are not obliged to make the contracts happen, you are obliged to finalize the contracts, to fulfill the agreement and agreed volumes and prices.
Approximately 20% of Russian LNG deliveries are later re-exported from European ports to other countries across the globe. During the winter, this is the only way Russian LNG can reach the Asian market. However, the EU plans to stop this practice next March as part of its 14th sanctions package.
The northern path of LNG supplies from Russia to Asia is closed by obvious weather reasons, and that is when Russians were transshipping the LNG supplies through European ports. Transshipment ban will limit this possibility, and by doing so decrease the Kremlin revenues coming from LNG supplies.
Europe's reliance on Russian gas has already fallen from 40% to as low as 10 to 15%, with the objective of a complete phase-out by 2027.
A Polish documentary depicting the lives of pianists taking part in the International Chopin Piano Competition has won the prestigious Emmy Award. The film, which portrays the professional and private lives of the contestants, shows both the highs of reaching the finals and the lows of not winning the contest.
Pianoforte follows the preparations of several young and hopeful pianists for one of the world's most prestigious piano competitions. Out of the initial 160 competitors, only 12 reach the final stage. Those who don't are either left practicing for another 5 years or left wondering what could have been had they spent a few minutes more a day polishing their craft.
Not being in first place is a universal feeling. I think that both me and a significant number of people feel the same. It's a fact of life that we often don't end up in first place, despite wanting to. What do we do about that fact?
While the contestants rehearse for hours upon hours every day, there's more to their lives than piano practice. Pianoforte gives viewers a behind-the-scenes look at what it means to be a professional pianist, from the years of backbreaking practice and study, through the day-to-day lives of young adults looking to make an impression on the world of classical music, to the performances themselves.
The Chopin competition is truly a global event, very exciting, and going behind the scenes is quite a discovery. You see a completely different dimension of a great event. So it's like going backstage at the Olympics, only in classical music.
Pianoforte is the first Polish documentary film to win an international Emmy and a second Polish production to ever win the award. The first international Emmy Award ceremony was held in 1973. The title of an international Emmy winner is one of the most prestigious distinctions in the world of TV and documentary filmmaking.
Critical energy infrastructure near the Icelandic city of Grindavik is being threatened by a non-stop flow of lava, which has been engulfing everything in its path since last Thursday. Fire brigades are working tirelessly to cool down the lava before defense barriers sheltering local infrastructure are destroyed. This eruption, the 7th in the past year alone, is providing a significant challenge for the nation known for its rich geothermal activity. Zuzana Jurek has more.
Molten rock has continued to climb up the defense barriers, with the situation reaching critical levels, according to local officials.
We are standing by the edge of the lava where it crawled over the Grindavik road, and of course this is a major natural disaster. Currently there is no activity at the Blue Lagoon. The damage to the road network is extensive and the Svartsengi power line is down. It collapsed where it passed over the lava, so the damage is extensive.
The defense barriers are responsible for sheltering the crucial Svartsengi power plant and the Nyardovik pipeline. The infrastructure is responsible for supplying hot water used for home heating within the Reykjanes Peninsula.
It's heavy for us because now we don't have any hot water because the lava field is over the pipes. So it's very difficult. We are about, altogether with Grindavik people, about 35,000 people in this area. Don't have any heating at the moment, so it's very difficult for us.
Fire brigades began the lava cooling operations late on Saturday. A total of 12 water cannons were set up against the barricades, spanning 360 meters. The operation has continued uninterrupted for the past 24 hours, in spite of significant challenges.
The conditions are indeed dangerous. We are climbing up these defensive barriers with hoses and other equipment, so these are far from ideal circumstances. But that's just how it is sometimes.
First glimpses of lava appeared on Thursday. The flow continued uninterrupted over the weekend.
I looked out the north-facing window and saw a faint glow. Then I saw the plumes begin, so I just kept watching through the window as it happened.
Residents and visitors were evacuated over the weekend, though authorities insist there is no threat to air travel in the region. Though Iceland, which sits on a fault line of Eurasian and North American tectonic plates, is a known seismic hotspot, prior to 2021 there had been no volcanic activity in the peninsula for 800 years.
Today, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha attended the G7, trying to garner more support for the war-torn country. Afterwards, the foreign minister traveled to Poland, where he met with his Polish counterpart, Radosław Sikorski. Ukraine's needs are acute. More air defense, more weapons and ammunition, sanctions against Russia, and decisive deterrence of the axis of evil. Is time running out to help Ukraine? Joining us now to discuss is Ivana Stradner, Senior Fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Hello, Ivana. Nice to see you, and thanks for joining us on World News Tonight.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure to speak with you.
Now, what does Ukraine need in the short term to be in the best possible situation when Donald Trump comes in and is inaugurated as president?
So to begin with, we really have very little time to support Ukraine in terms of to provide Ukraine all it needs to defend itself and to win this war. And while the United States, followed by our allies, some allies, provide Ukraine with a permission to hit inside Russia, that is actually really not enough, because we also need to send more long-range missiles. We have to provide other weapons to Ukraine, but also, as you mentioned, to really tight sanctions related to Russia. Because even though some people argue that sanctions are not working, I do believe in 2025, Putin will definitely feel in his economy our sanctions. That is precisely why it is right now the right time actually to impose even more sanctions on Russia, so Putin can feel it economically, because he has already shifted his economy, making it like a war economy. And the third thing is basically we do need to support Ukraine financially to make make sure that Ukraine is safe and that they can survive this winter. Because make no mistakes, I do believe that what we saw in the past, Russia targeting critical infrastructure in Ukraine, they are going to continue doing that, basically making more panic inside the country and making sure that a lot of Ukrainians actually flee, which might actually then resort in another problem, in Europe with the influx of people coming to Ukraine, which is exactly what Putin wants. And then, that will be followed by all those fears about Ukraine freezing this winter. So that is precisely why right now we need to help Ukraine also with its critical infrastructure. And actually, there is one other last point that I want to make. We can provide all the weapons that we want and all the support to Ukraine that we want. It will not be enough until we actually make a final decision what victory really means and stop having that delusion, living in a delusion world, thinking that Putin wants to negotiate it. That is precisely what I fear that might actually happen with the Trump administration, who thinks, that he can make sure that put Putin on the table and to negotiate in 24 hours. If you read carefully Putin's statements for his domestic audience, he actually noted multiple times that this is not up for negotiations. He does not want to negotiate. All he really needs to do and wants to do is to buy more time to replenish his military, to reposition and continue. And what we saw, during the meeting today, also during G7 meeting, is that people are rightfully very concerned because, make no mistake, this war is not going to stay in Ukraine because Putin, in my view, is indeed going to challenge the rest of Europe right below the threshold of war. Look, he does not need to really roll on tanks and jets in Poland. He does not need to roll on tanks and jets in any of the neighboring countries. Destabilizing Europe or making provocations or using sabotage, what we already see across Europe, will put Europe on the brink because never forget that Putin is not a military guy. He's a KGB guy. He loves to exploit the vulnerabilities of his opponents. And that is precisely what I have to admit. Policymakers in Poland understand much better than some policymakers in Brussels or Washington, D.C.
Right. Well, some say that the response coming from Europe is already too weak and showing just how weak Europe indeed is. Well, you touched on so many points here. Let me see. How important do you think of a bargaining chip right now Ukraine's occupation of the Kursk region is in Russia? Do you think that this is perhaps a bigger, even though it's not very big territorially, it could be crucial if indeed any negotiations are to take place once Donald Trump is inaugurated?
You're absolutely right that this is not maybe strategically the most important part of Russia, but it actually shows also Putin's weakness. And it actually also shows Putin's weakness domestically. He doesn't want to be perceived as a weak leader. So that is precisely why Kursk is indeed a bargaining chip. And that is precisely why the United States, the United Kingdom, and our allies, some of our allies, have made the right decision to help Ukraine by putting Russia on the defensive. Whether such negotiations, as I mentioned, will end Putin's aggression and appetite for his imperial and ideological war, I don't think so, because he is not in a rush. He has time, and he's going to just use Donald Trump's willingness to negotiate, just to buy more time. And as I mentioned, to replenish his military, to reposition, and to continue. And that is precisely why we should not fall for that trip next year, to think that Putin is willing to negotiate. And second thing, to not to impose further sanctions, because Trump's also think, for example, probably that we should not invite Ukraine to NATO. And in my view, that's a wrong call, because Putin is not the one who should make those calls. And I understand, look, I'm sitting here in Washington, D.C., where a lot of policy policymakers might actually fear nuclear escalation. And as soon as we provided Ukraine with long-range missiles, and recently also allow Ukraine to hit inside Russia to defend itself, Putin immediately changed the nuclear doctrine because he understands perfectly that the West fears escalation in Armageddon. But just look at the history. When we send javelins, Putin didn't escalate. When we send jets, Putin didn't escalate. When we send long-range missiles, Putin didn't escalate. Actually, Putin has no rational incentive to use nuclear weapons, but he understands perfectly how to escalate to de-escalate.
Right, and something we often forget is when we sent javelins, it was Donald Trump who was the first to do so. So let's, with that, have some good hope in mind. Ivana Stradner, thank you very much for joining me tonight. Appreciate your insight.
Thank you very much for inviting me, as always.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time. Good night.